Hi, my name is Brandon, but you can call me Big Z, and today I'm reviewing Michael J. Sullivan and all of his books. He is one of my favorite authors, and I came about him by kind of a different way than most of my other books. In most of my other books, I either I found the bookstore, or I saw good reviews, or heard people talk about them, and I picked him up. But him, it was a couple of years ago, and I just got my first Kindle as a Christmas gift. And I was trying to fill it up with books, and I was looking through the store, the Amazon store, at the different fancy books, and I looked at ones that were cheap and free. And there's this one book that I can't remember if it was at that time if it was 99 cents or if it was on sale for free, but it had good reviews. It was called The Crown Conspiracy, and it was by some guy named Michael J. Sullivan. And I never heard of him, never heard of the book. But the reviews are really good. Like it was one of the top reviewed books of that price in the fantasy genre. And I thought, well, might as well take a chance on it, and I downloaded it. And I read it, and I really enjoyed it. So I did a review on Amazon. It had a few problems with the book. I mentioned them, but overall, I think I gave it a 5-star review and said I really liked it, and I'm planning to read the next ones. And then a couple of days later, someone commented on the review, and I looked at the comment, and it was the author, and that was actually the first interaction with an author that I've ever had, especially one that I really enjoyed. So it was very odd. Like he was saying, some of the problems I had, explaining and saying that a lot of the questions will be answered in the next books. And then I responded to him, and I was like, it was really an unusual thing. So after that, I immediately read the next book, and I read the next book, and then I read each book, and I review them, and he would comment on it, saying thanks for the review, and if I have any questions, he'd answer them, and it was a really cool interaction. So Michael's path to where he is now as a hybrid author is very different from what most authors go through, to get their books to the readers. It started out, he wrote 8 books, I believe, and it was almost a writing process. He was getting better as a writer. I think especially his last book, I think it was a literary fiction book, and he thought it was really good. He thought it was his best work ever. And he really tried to sell it. He went all over trying to find an agent, trying to find a publisher, and he didn't get anywhere. So he was after that, after his best book couldn't do anything, he essentially just gave up with writing. And it was actually his, I believe one of his kids had trouble reading. And at that time, Harry Potter had come out, so that he had gotten the first Harry Potter book for his kid, and the kid loved it, and learned to love reading, and it's such an important thing. If you can learn to love reading instead of having it forced on you and hating it, your whole life will be slightly different. Like if you ever have a shit day, or things aren't going right for you, or you just want to get away from stuff, you can pick up a book and get lost in this world. And if you can't read, or not a fan of reading, you can't do that. You just don't have that option, and it's sad. So after he read the books, Harry Potter books too, and really loved them, and after his kids loved them, but when the books were finished, he was thinking that I wish there was something else like that for him to read, something that is for all ages, but still is very well written and has some adult themes. But it's not just for adults, it's for all ages. So, Amazon had the ebook market, and they also had print to order services where if a person wanted the actual book, they could pay for it and they would send to them, print on demand. So Michael had previously been working as a graphic designer, so he decided to do the art of his books by himself, and they're pretty good. They're not it was more architectural kind of of the places in the book, and they were a nice presentation. They're well done. That's one thing on so many ebooks, indie books, self-published books. They're not, the cover turns you off right away. So he knew that, and he like created for himself a good cover. And his wife did all the editing, I believe, and all the helping him with it. But there were some spell check errors at the time, and that's happens a lot if you don't have a professional editor doing it for you. But he decided to try a lot of different things with the books. But I don't know if you know, but with Amazon, if a book is under $3 or under $2.99, you get a smaller cut of the revenue. But if it's over $2.99 or it's $2.99 and over, you get a bigger cut. So the things like the first book, they try to get people hooked on it. Like they know their books are good, so you need to get readers to actually read the book and fall in love with the author and his work. So they have the first book for 99 cents, and then if they have a sale, they have it for free. And since it's rated, and people read it and they rate it high, and it'd be up on the charts if people are looking for new books. And the second book would be like $2.99. So then it's still cheap, but they get more of the percentage of the revenue. Then the third book would be like $3.99, and then the fourth book would be $4.99. Then they're hooked, and then that they won't go too much more than that. But the idea is that's maybe when the new book first comes out, they'll charge a little higher, and then they'll lower the price, and they'll have sales, and they'll try to get people to pick them up. And it's really what they did, especially early in the game, was very intelligent, and they had a great idea, and they really could sell their book well. And also, even what I did with me with responding on how much I loved, that's a form of publicity, a form of like advertising almost, trying to get people if you have an author comment on your review, you're more likely to read the next book and write another review. And and the more reviews that Book on Amazon has, the better, especially if they're good. They're doing really good raking in the dough from their ebooks, because since they was completely self-published, they were, apart from Amazon's cut, they were taking home all the money. But Michael really wanted his book in more people's hands. That was his goal. Like he wanted more people to read it. And no matter how good you get it as a self-publisher, as an indie book, you're never going to reach the mass audience that a big publisher would. So before the sixth book comes out, even though he'd written it, he decided to try to go after a publisher to see if anyone was interested. So I think he sent some letters out, and some were interested. So and the one that ended up offering him a great offer was Orbit, and that's I think Hachette's fantasy and science fiction division. And it's great because I had enjoyed a lot of Orbit books. Like I would, back when Borders was still a thing, I had to go into Borders, and if I was looking for a new book, like I would, one of the first things I look for is that little Orbit sticker, that I knew that I found a lot of great new authors from them. So that was really cool that they went with him, and he became one of the first big, especially fantasy authors that went from self-publishing to being with a big publisher. The only bad thing about being signed with a big publisher was that I had to wait to read the final book. But actually, they instead of releasing like 6 books, they decided that since the books were a little on the shorter side, they would combine them into 3 books. So it's almost like mini anthologies. But it works well. There's some of the doubles have, like, the books have similar themes, but it ends up happening like the final book is gigantic and really amazing. Like it's really good. Like the Heir of Novron, and that's really good, and that's my favorite of the series. So I'm not going to spoil the books, but I'm going to talk a little bit about, what they are, what's so great about them. The book mainly stars Royce and Hadrian, and they're members of the team called Riyria, and Royce is a former assassin, and Hadrian is a former gladiator, and they team up to try to you know, it kind of mercenaries, but they're not doing anything too bad. Like, they go to the royalty, and if they need something done, they'll pay them and they'll get it done. Like, say you have a rival intercepted love letters to your mistress, and they're threatening to release them to your wife. Well, hey, hire Riyria, and they'll go in and steal the letters without them ever knowing. You know, they do stuff like that. And in the first book, Theft of Swords, or The Crown Conspiracy, you know, they're contracted by a noble to steal a sword. And, you know, it seems pretty innocent. They're offering he's offering a bag of gold for because he flirted with one of the best swordsmen in the country's wife, and the guy challenged him to a duel. And this he thinks that this guy isn't that good. The reason he's so good is because he has a magic sword. So they want him to steal the sword before the duel. Of course, you know, things aren't quite as they seem. And as they go into the palace where the sword's supposed to be, they see some creepy guy leaving, and they go in, and they find the king dead. And they're the ones in the room, and all of a sudden the alarm goes on, and, well, you can see what they think happened. But it gets different because the princess, Arista, she doesn't believe that, and she breaks him out of prison, and they go on a bit of an adventure. And it's really enjoyable. Like, it's nothing too dark, but it's kind of a light fantasy action adventure story, and it's just incredibly fun read. And, you know, the second half of the book, you know, again, it's the Theft of Swords, but they are contracted by some poor villager that travel across the country to get to him and come kill the dragon that's terrorizing their little town. But and it's called Galilibron or something like that. And it's an ancient elvish creature or something. But they have to find the sword that will kill it. So you know, that one is more an adventure. There's not too much in the overarching story, but it's a great, like, beginning, middle, end, and it kind of gets you get to know who these characters are. And that's what's great. Even though, like, there's 3 books, or really there's 6 books, each book is, you can read it on its own, even though it's part of an overarching story. They're incredible reads, like, from beginning, middle, and end. You know, they have a solid story. They don't, like, leave you hanging. They aren't just, like, jerking you around until you get to the final book or something. And, you know, they're incredible reads. And, you know, in the second book is Rise of Empire. And that's really about the Empire, which is, like, trying to bring back the old Empire, but under the rule of the Church. And, you know, they're trying to get rid of all the royalist countries. But, you know, that's more, those books are definitely, you know, it definitely has a bit of the second book issue, even though this book 3 and 4, like, but they're really more focused on building the characters, and, you know, you learn more about their backstory, and, you know, more about, you know, what's going on with them and their interaction with the different characters, and it's really enjoyable. And then, you know, the final book, which is Heir of Novron, or and then the final, actually, 6th book is, I think, Perseplique or something like that. Well, you know, that is where it really gets into more of the epic fantasy. I know the 5th book is really fun, even though still, because you have Hadrian, which is kind of like, he's a warrior, but he's not a knight. Like, he's kind of like a mercenary, or he was a gladiator. He's had but he doesn't like killing anymore. But he has to pretend to be a knight to try to and fight in the tournament to try to figure out what's going on with this. Some stuff's going on. We have to go undercover really to solve it. And I had a lot of fun reading that. And then in the 6th book, it's really almost a straight up epic fantasy story, and it just really delivers on that. What I really love too is that, you know, each book had a decent amount of, like, twists and turns, and it also throughout the whole story, there's bigger twists and bigger turns, And some, they're not like too crazy. Like if you see some of them coming, but they're all still very excellent when they come into action. And they're really enthralling, and they're really fun to read, and they cause like excellent moments in the series. And part of the reason for that is because while he was doing the whole self-publishing thing, he realized that he liked to be able to go back and change things early in the books after writing like books like towards the end of the series, where like there's things that he wished he could go back and have a little different to set up more to the final story. So after this, he decided that whenever he would write a new series, he would, before he started publishing a book, he would write the entire series. Like he wouldn't proofread it and edit it yet, but he'd go back and polish the first one, then he could send it out. Then go through and like finish editing and everything. But it creates a really interesting thing where each book can have a lot of different parts of it that will lead up to the final story, and it's just really interesting to read like that. And I mean, I probably wouldn't advise other authors to do it, but for him, it really works. So at the end of the third or sixth book, Hadrian, Arista, and Royce's stories are at an end. And, it is a fantastic end. Like, he really knew how to deliver on the perfect ending. And, I loved it. But, he kind of said he loved, the author loved it so much that he didn't really want to muddy the ending by writing sequels to it. Like, he said that he was not, like, 100% against it, but he didn't really want to do it. So instead, when people wanted more of Royce and Hadrian, he decided that, well, one of the best parts in the books is that they are completely developed characters. Like, they still grow from book to book, but, there's no, the farm boy going to the big city and figuring out the world and trying to, pulling out from where he's known. Like, there's none of that sort of fancy trope. These are experts at what they do. They are well-developed characters before even the story even begins. So, I mean, they've been a team for like 10 years. And, some of the stories that you may know from the books, but in 10 years, there's a lot of different missions they've gone on that no one knows about. Maybe not even the author. So he decided to write a trilogy of prequels. And, the first one is right here, The Crown Tower. And that was really based on like their first mission together, like, and what brought them together, and what happened with it. And you do hear a little bit about that, and like when they comment about their first mission in the main books, but it's really great to see it like firsthand. And it's a really good book. I mean, it has a little bit of like the prequel thing, but it was really interesting to see them really be almost enemies at the beginning. Like, they really, especially Royce, kind of hates Hadrian. But they don't get along at all. So it's really interesting to see that relationship start to build. And then the second one is, I couldn't find it. It's somewhere among all my books, which is funny, but that second one is actually one I helped beta read. I think it's The Rose and the Thorn. And that's another really interesting prequel, but this is more a direct prequel to the first book. Like, it happens like a couple years before it, but it really sets up what leads to the story. Like, you have a young Arista, and you have like her guard that's there, and you have what happened, like how some stuff happened in their past, and you have, I think it's the second year after. It's like a direct sequel after the first one, so it's still early on, but there's a lot of stuff that leads into the Crown conspiracy, and what led to that. The only problem is that it suffers a little bit from the prequelitis, where if you read the books, you kind of know what happened, so when there's some twists and turns and things, like, you already know what's going on. So because of that, like, the author has said that he preferred people to start out with Seth the Swords. And I kind of agree with that. But I almost wonder if it might be better to read the prequels first. Like it's a different introduction to the character, but you know, if you have read the books, there'll be some things that you know you see and you'll enjoy more probably. But there are other things that you would already know about if you read the main books. So I'm not sure whether it'd be better to start with the prequels or start, you know, the way the author started it with Theft of Swords. Like it's tough to decide. But the third book is Death of Dolgas, and that's actually one. You know, he wanted to do a hardcover book, and Orbit wasn't too interested in more prequels, so they probably would have enjoyed more a sequel to the main series, but he didn't want to do that. So instead, he decided to do a Kickstarter. It's really moved into hybrid publishing. And you know, the Kickstarter did really well. He also kickstarted a sci-fi time-traveling book, Hollow World. Through this, he was able to get funding and able to pay for, you know, professional artists to do the cover, and be able to pay for professional structural editors. And he was able to do a hardcover run, when all Orbit ever wanted to do was a trade paperback, which I enjoy, but you know, he wanted his books in hardcover, and Orbit wasn't prepared to do that. Death of Dolgas might be my favorite of the prequels, just because it avoids a lot of the pitfalls that most prequels fall into, because it doesn't really connect to any of the overarching story from the main series. Like, it's just like a one-off. It's like just, you can, like, that one is most, you could just read one book. You could read that book and not have to worry about anything else. Because, you know, the events in it aren't big enough to affect the major story. And where it takes place is kind of in a farther part of the country there. So, like, they don't ever go there in the main books. Almost like a great standalone book, even though you'll probably enjoy it a lot more if you know all the characters and everything that's gone into them before and after. So Michael wanted to write another book in this world, but he didn't want to write a sequel, and he was worried that if he wrote another Royce and Hadrian prequel, they might wear out their welcome. So he decided to go 3,000 years in the past and, you know, write a new series. And what's great about this is that you could read this and have no idea of what's going on in the other books, and it wouldn't matter. Like, for fans of his works, like, there's some words, some places, some people that sound familiar, but since it's so far in the past, like, it doesn't, the other stuff doesn't really matter. It also creates this very interesting world where, you know, most of the time in the vast majority of fantasy books, they take place in, you know, the medieval era. So like 1200 to like 1600s in our world. You know, the whole knights in armor and swords and stuff like that. But in this book, by going 3,000 years in the past, it becomes almost more like the Romans. Especially the Romans are like the elves or the Frey, and the Celts and barbarians are more like the humans or the runes in this world. So it creates really interesting things where they're like almost like tribal, and they have like stone spears, and like the one guy has a bronze sword and he's like known, like a copper sword, and he's like impressive. But the Frey have much more modern weapons, and they have magic. And that's the big, and you know, in the original series, magic is mostly dead. Like, it's in this, you know, in the past. But in this one, you know, especially for the elves, magic is at the height, or the art is what they call it. So it creates a very different world than, even though it's the same world, but by being 3,000 years different, it's a very different kind of world. And you know, it stars three characters. One is the widow of a chieftain of the one clan, and for that clan they also have a wise woman, a really young wise woman, and then they have the god killer Wraith, and they view the elves as like as their gods, and the immortal gods, but he kills one and proves that they're not immortal. they just live really long lives, like 5,000 years. The first book just came out recently, Age of Myth, and I really enjoyed it. And, you know, again, like his other books, all of the books in the series are written. Like, he's doing the editing on the fourth book right now. And, you know, it's kind of funny, but, like, no matter what, even as long as the world doesn't end, you're going to eventually be able to read all the books. Like, it's not a question mark with George R. R. Martin or anyone. You know, these books are done. If you start a series, you're going to be able to read the rest of them. And, you know, but it's still, because, you know, he wrote them all, like, there's a lot of, like, strings that you see starting to be pulled, and you think that, you know, what might come later, like, I think it's going to be really interesting. But it's also a great read just by itself. Like, I'm satisfied having read it. Like, I'm not, like, there's no, like, big cliffhanger. I'm like, damn it, I really want to read the next book, and now I can't. You know, and I would still prefer to read the book now, but I'm okay waiting a year. Again, because he wanted to be in hardcover books, he wants a new publisher, Del Rey, and, you know, they contracted him to write, you know, the books, and they released them in hardcover. And, you know, it's a great fit for him. And, you know, I think he has more plans to do another prequel for Royce and Hadrian. Like, because now he's done writing these, so he's going to write some more books while they're waiting to be published. So, really, overall, I mean, he's one of my favorite authors, Michael J. Sullivan. And I really recommend him. You know, for all ages. And, you know, even if you're not a big fan of fantasy, like, he'd be a great introduction to it. Like, it's relatively light fantasy, nothing too crazy, nothing too violent, nothing too vulgar. Like, it's an excellent book. I really recommend it for everyone to read. So, thanks for watching.